In today's video, we're going to show you how to perform fractional splits from Nucleus Hives for a massive increase, and that's coming right up. Hi, I'm Scott McPherson, and this is Beekeeping from Scratch, where it's about the bees. Hey there, beekeepers. Welcome to Beekeeping from Scratch, where we document our journey rebuilding our operations back to profitability together with you. Now, before we get started, if we haven't met yet, my name is Scott McPherson, and this is the 8th installment of the show, Nothing But Bees, where we talk about history, core concepts, myths, and other issues facing our bees. If you have watched a few Beekeeping from Scratch videos, please consider subscribing and ringing that little notification bell icon so that you'll get notified the moment we upload a new video. Your subscribership and watching these videos all the way to the end helps us out by getting this material in front of other beekeepers and people interested in keeping bees. I really appreciate it. Thanks. In today's video, we are going to be discussing fractional splitting from Nucleus Hives, which is a powerful method to increase your livestock super fast without weakening and potentially dinking your colonies. A dink in this case is when a colony can't recover and build back up and becomes a waste of your time and resources and is a drain on your operation. Fractional splitting provides a way to split your nukes by taking only one frame from your nukes and giving them an empty frame back to redraw and rebound. It takes just 1 week for a strong nuke to rebuild and completely lay up an empty frame. And we're going to take advantage of that to multiply our colonies, not 3 times, not 4 times, not even 5. Now, of course, this all relies on the length of your beekeeping season, but listen, we're talking about increasing the number of your colonies between 8 and, whether you wish to believe it or not, up to 16 times and have them ready for winter. That's right, starting with just 5 nukes, you could go into winter with between 40 and 80 nukes. The only limiting factors are your ability to procure the number of nukes to house your bees, how early in the spring you can begin this process, and how late in the summer you should stop to give the bees enough time to collect the fall flow and bed down for winter. All right, well, now that I've gotten you excited, it's time for a couple of caveats. First of all, if you don't already have the equipment handy, this method is going to require a significant investment. Complete nukes cost anywhere between $20 and $50 a piece, plus the cost of the frames, and you're going to need as many nukes as you plan to create, as well as 1 super per nuke so the bees have somewhere to store honey for winter. This method is strictly for growing or rebuilding your numbers fast, and the nukes that you are using for growth are going to provide you with no honey at all. In fact, you're going to be feeding your bees sugar syrup for nearly the whole season to ensure that they have enough carbohydrate to build masses of comb. So you can add the cost of feeders and feed into that equation as well. A strong nuke can consume as much as 1 gallon of 1-to-1 syrup every week, and that's about 4 heaping cups of sugar per hive per week. Even if the bees stop taking the feed, keep the feed on the bees so they have it if and when they need it during periods of bad weather and dearth. If the bees stop taking feed, just give them less feed at a time. Use smaller mason jars if that's what you're using, but you need to make sure they have it when they need it. The feeders you want to use for this method are either top feeders of some sort or Boardman entrance feeders. Feeders that take up the space of a frame are not at all recommended when using this method for increase. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about how fractional splitting works. Starting out with 5 nukes and an empty nuke, and don't forget the frames, and being careful not to take the queen, you take 1 frame from each of the 5 nukes and donate it to the empty nuke. You replace the missing frame with a new empty frame dropped right into the center of each donor nuke, preferably between the 2 most perfect capped comb faces that you can find in the hive. Okay, so now what do you have? You have 5 nukes with a queen with room to grow, and you have 1 queenless nuke with all the resources that it needs to grow a new queen. All right, so what have you accomplished? You've made a 20% increase and dissuaded to some degree the impulse to swarm, at least for now. The nukes are no longer crowded, and there is a gap in the center of the brood nest that will refocus the bees to building that new comb so that the queen can lay it up and rebuild the worker force. In a week, the 5 nukes will have completely or almost completely redrawn and laid up the new frame, and it will be filled with brood, and there is likely to already be some capped or ready to be capped brood along the top of the frame, and those nukes will be ready to donate another one of their old frames so you can repeat the process. So at this point you might be asking, I just went from 5 nukes to 6 and then again to 7. How is this going to produce 40 to 80 nukes by winter? Now this, my friend, is the power of compounding interest. You're earning a dividend of 20% each week, compounded once every 5 weeks. That means at the end of 5 weeks, you now have 10 nukes. If you have 10 nukes, you can now start producing 2 nukes per week. 5 frames from your starting nukes and 5 frames from the nukes that you just created over the last 5 weeks. Do you see where this is going? Provided nothing goes wrong, and sometimes it does. You may have a queen failure, or she gets eaten by a bird during mating, or you do end up with a dink. You may end up having to combine a couple of nukes now and again. But assuming that everything goes as planned, at the end of the next 5 weeks, you will now have 20 colonies. And at the end of 5 weeks after that, you'll have 40 colonies. At this point, it's still summer, and the goldenrod aster flow will just be beginning, and your bees will be able to fill up their supers in preparation for winter. If your season is long enough and you can fit in another full cycle, and providing nothing has gone wrong, you could be going into winter with 80 colonies, grown from those original 5. That is a 16-fold increase in your livestocks. Now, let's say you start the season with 10 nukes. Or how about 20 nukes? Can you see the power this method has of making bees for you? Now, some of the smarter beekeepers are going to stop me and say, hold on, Scott. You've forgotten an important detail here. The new nukes won't have a laying queen for about a month. Good catch. At this point, you have 2 choices. If you already know how to produce queens, then feel free to raise queens at the same time you're fractionally splitting. But if you aren't yet familiar with queen rearing, the bees are, and they're making queens for you. When you make your splits, you should also be checking the nukes that you made last week to ensure that they have successfully started growing at least 1 queen. In the majority of cases, the bees will raise 2, 3, or even more queens at the same time. And now it's time for me to point you to the queen calendar, which tells you at what stages queens are in development from egg to laying. The queen rearing beekeeper has a little more control over timing, while the beekeeper that lets their bees raise emergency queens is somewhat subject to the bee's whim. The bees may choose larvae that just hatched, or they may choose larvae that are just under 3 days old. Additionally, they may not start raising a queen for a day or 2 if they don't quite get it right away that they need to. However, if you are following this method, then you are performing your fractional splits every 7 days. At the end of 7 days, the bees either will have 1 to a few freshly capped queen cells, or they will not yet be capped, but will be in a few days. If they are capped, then you can cut out the extra queen cells and distribute them to your newly formed nukes. And if the queen cells aren't yet capped, then they will be on the next 7th day, and they will probably be within a day or 2 of emerging. Either way, the queens will emerge at pretty much the same time. Whether you get to take them this week or you have to wait till next week makes absolutely no difference. Use whatever marking system you have to track new nukes and the stage of their queen development so you can quickly know which nukes to go to grab queen cells for your new nukes. This, by the way, if you haven't yet caught on, is also the way to give cells to nukes that have failed to raise a queen, or indeed for any nuke that has gone queenless or has a queen failure. Yes, this method does require that you already have the equipment or can invest in equipment. And as your numbers grow, the effort gets a lot more intense. But it gets you the bees that you need to potentially start producing the product that you want within 1 year of starting. If your plan is to sell nukes, then you can use fractional splitting next spring to sell 20% worth of your survivor stocks every week of the spring season, without reducing your numbers, and then use the summertime to rebuild your numbers back to your pre-winter numbers. Alternatively, if you want to sell queens, you have plenty of colonies to choose from and to leverage as queen rearing resources. And you could be making hundreds of virgin queens every month. If you want to sell mated queens, well then you'll need to have more nukes of some sort. I like to use 2 or 3 frame deep nukes for this, and they are also called queen hotels or queen castles. If you want to make honey, you can either just super the nukes as they are, let them build their brood nests into 2 or 3 hive bodies, and use the 4th and 5th supers for storing honey. You could also buy 8 or 10 frame hives if you truly wish to be a honey producer. You can also trap pollen, collect propolis, or produce royal queen jelly. Or if you have the money to invest and are ready, willing, and able, you can continue fractionally splitting from your winter survivors and build your numbers into the several hundred for next year. At this point, the world is your oyster. If you're interested in the camera and audio equipment that I use check out the affiliate links below in the description. I get a small commission and it doesn't cost you a single penny more, and it sure does help out the channel. And if you found this video useful, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell icon so that you get notified the next time we upload our new video. Alright guys, now remember, stay safe and don't forget, it's about the bees.